Admiral Kate Sullivan's flagship, the UES Wolverine, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system exactly 6 weeks after Jake Morrison's first distress call. What she found there made her stop and stare at the tactical display in disbelief. "Ma'am," reported her sensor officer, "I'm reading one human vessel in stable orbit around the planet. No signs of hostile activity, no distress signals." "What about the Vex?" "I'm detecting massive debris fields throughout the system, energy signatures consistent with destroyed biomechanical vessels, but no active Vex signals anywhere." Kate activated the communication system. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Sullivan. Please report your status." Jake's voice came back immediately, calm and professional. "Admiral, good to see you. Status is green across the board. Zephyrian survivors have been evacuated to safe zones. Planet is secure." "Secure? What happened? To the Vex invasion force?" "Eliminated, ma'am. We can give you a full briefing when you come aboard." Kate looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They had spent 6 weeks racing across the galaxy, expecting to find either human heroes or human corpses. Instead, they found Jake Morrison calmly announcing that he had somehow defeated an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. "All ships assume standard formation," Kate ordered. "Marines prepare for planetary assessment. Science teams, I want detailed analysis of those debris fields." As the human fleet moved into the system, reports began flowing in from all directions. The planet's surface showed massive geological changes, new lakes, shifted mountain ranges, and vast areas where Vex structures had simply disappeared into the ground. The alien industrial complexes that had been consuming the planet were gone, replaced by natural water systems and slowly recovering vegetation. Colonel Ben Hayes led the first Marine landing party to the surface. What he found amazed him. The Zephyrian survivors were not huddled in emergency shelters. They were working alongside human crew members to rebuild their colony. Temporary structures had been erected using a combination of human engineering and Zephyrian agricultural knowledge. "Captain Morrison," Ben said when he met Jake at the temporary command post, "I've got to ask, how did you do all this with just 4 people? Jake smiled and gestured to the mixed group of humans and Zephyrians working around them. "Who says we only had 4 people? Veltar and his volunteers did most of the heavy lifting once we showed them how." Veltar approached with a data tablet in his hands. The Zephyrian administrator looked completely different from the desperate refugee who had first called for help. He moved with confidence and purpose, clearly comfortable working with the human military personnel. "Admiral Sullivan," Veltar said formally, "on behalf of the Zephyrian people, I want to thank Earth for responding to our call for help. Your people have saved not just our lives, but our entire way of life." Kate studied the scene around her. Humans and Zephyrians were working together to process refugee lists, distribute supplies, and plan reconstruction efforts. It looked less like a military occupation and more like a collaborative relief effort. "What can you tell me about the Vex?" she asked. Dr. Amy Wells stepped forward with a comprehensive report. "We've learned a great deal about their biology and technology. They're an engineered species designed for rapid expansion and resource consumption. But they have significant weaknesses that can be exploited by anyone willing to think outside conventional military doctrine." "And you destroyed them completely?" "Not destroyed," Jake corrected. "Defeated. We captured several hundred Vex drones and have been studying their technology. Some of them are actually showing signs of individual consciousness now that they're disconnected from the swarm network." Kate was amazed. Not only had Jake defeated the Vex, he had done it while following rules of engagement that protected non-combatants and preserved valuable intelligence. It was the kind of measured, professional response that Earth's military prided itself on. But the real surprise came when Veltar activated a galaxy-wide communication array that Lisa Park had helped him build. Citizens of the galaxy, Veltar began. I am speaking to you from Kepler 442b, where 6 weeks ago the Vex swarm attempted to destroy our world. Today, I stand here alive and free because one species answered our call for help. The humans of Earth responded to our distress signal without hesitation, without demand for payment, and without concern for their own safety. The message was being broadcast on all frequencies, reaching every major world in galactic civilization. In the High Council chambers on Centaurus Prime, representatives from hundreds of species listened in stunned silence. These humans did not just drive off the Vex, Veltar continued. They eliminated the threat permanently while showing mercy to captured enemies and compassion to all survivors. They have asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to help us rebuild our world. Kate realized what was happening. This was not just a rescue mission report. It was a formal testimony to the Galactic Council. Veltar was recommending humanity for full council membership based on their actions at Kepler 442b. I hereby request that the species known as humans be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, Veltar concluded. They have demonstrated both the capability and the character necessary to defend galactic civilization against threats that the rest of us cannot face alone. The response was immediate and galaxy-wide. Within hours, communication channels were flooded with messages from species that had heard rumors about the Vex defeat, but never believed them. Scientists wanted access to human military technology. Diplomats wanted to establish trade relationships. Military commanders wanted to study human tactical doctrine. But the most important message came from the High Council itself. Earthship Wolverine. This is Prime Minister Zarthak of the Galactic High Council. We request an immediate audience with your commanding officer to discuss the events at Kepler 442b. Kate looked at Jake, who shrugged. Your call, Admiral. I'm just an exploration captain who answered a distress call. No, Kate said quietly. You're the man who just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The meeting with the High Council took place in space, aboard a massive diplomatic vessel that served as a neutral meeting ground for interspecies negotiations. Kate brought Jake and his entire crew as technical advisors, while the Council assembled, representatives from every major galactic civilization. Prime Minister Zarthak was a tall, crystalline being whose body reflected light in patterns that indicated emotional states. Currently, those patterns showed deep respect mixed with a certain amount of fear. Captain Morrison, Zarthak began, we have reviewed the sensor data from Kepler 442b. The energy readings from your final engagement with the Vex forces were unlike anything in our records. How did you achieve such results with such limited resources? Jake looked around the assembly chamber at hundreds of alien faces, all focused on him with expressions of curiosity and apprehension. These were the species that controlled galactic civilization, beings so advanced that they had eliminated war, poverty, and disease from their worlds, and they were asking him to explain how 4 humans had accomplished something their entire combined military could not. We used the tools we had available, Jake said simply, and we adapted our tactics to exploit enemy weaknesses. But the scale of destruction, pressed the Altarian science minister. You triggered a planetary-scale geological event. The energy release was equivalent to hundreds of fusion weapons. The planet did most of the work, Jake explained. We just gave it a push in the right direction. The council members exchanged glances. The idea of using a planet as a weapon was so far outside their experience that they could barely comprehend it. "Captain," said the Centaurian defense coordinator, "are all human military personnel capable of such creative tactical thinking?" Jake thought about his years serving alongside Marines, Navy personnel, and Special Forces operators. He thought about the human tendency to look at impossible situations and ask, "How do we win?" Instead of, "How do we survive?" "Pretty much," he said. "It's how we're trained." The council fell silent. The implications were staggering. Humanity represented a completely new type of military thinking, one that could potentially solve threats that had plagued the galaxy for generations. "Earth seeks membership in this council," Admiral Sullivan said formally. "We offer our military capabilities in defense of galactic civilization in exchange for full participation in interspecies trade, technology exchange, and diplomatic relations." The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Some species worried that humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable. Others argued that humanity's willingness to fight had already proven its value. A few suggested that humans should be studied before being granted full membership, but in the end, the vote was unanimous. The galaxy needed protectors, and humans had proven they were willing and able to fill that role. The formal ceremony took place on Earth, in the rebuilt United Nations building in New York. Representatives from every major galactic civilization gathered to witness humanity's acceptance into the broader community of intelligent species. Jake Morrison stood at the podium as the newest admiral of the Galactic. The Vex siege engine fired its first shot at dawn on the 32nd day of the siege. The energy beam carved through solid rock like a hot knife through butter, vaporizing a section of the hillside just meters from the bunker entrance. The ground shook so violently that several Zephyrians were knocked off their feet. "Next shot will be a direct hit," Ryan observed, checking his equipment one final time. Jake nodded. He had spent the last 2 days implementing his plan, and now everything depended on timing. "Lisa, are you in position?" The Intrepid had moved to a new hiding spot on the far side of the planet, where Lisa Park had been working around the clock to modify the ship's systems. "Ready, Captain. I've got 47 improvised seismic charges rigged and positioned according to your specifications." Jake looked at the geological survey data Veltar had provided. Kepler 442b sat on top of a massive underground water system that connected to volcanic vents deep beneath the planet's crust. The Vex had unknowingly positioned their siege engine directly over the largest intersection of these natural fault lines. "Amy, what's the status on that electromagnetic pulse device?" Dr. Amy Wells held up a device that looked like it had been built from spare parts and desperation. "It should work in theory. The frequency disruptor will scramble Vex neural networks in a 3-kilometer radius, but I can only build one, and it has to be placed manually." "That's my job," Jake said, checking his combat gear. Veltar approached, with a group of Zephyrian volunteers. "Captain Morrison, we want to help. This is our world, our people. We can't just hide while you risk everything for us." Jake looked at the tall, blue-gray aliens. 3 weeks ago, they had been farmers and administrators who had never held weapons. Now they were determined to fight for their home. "All right, but you follow my orders exactly. No heroics. The second energy blast from the siege engine struck even closer to the bunker. Chunks of melted rock rained down on the entrance. Third. "Shot incoming," Ryan reported. "We need to move now." Jake's plan was insane even by human standards. While the Vex focused their attention on the siege engine and the bunker, he was going to sneak through their lines, plant Amy's electromagnetic device in the middle of their command center, then trigger a controlled earthquake that would swallow their entire army. "Everyone ready?" Jake asked. The mixed group of humans and Zephyrians nodded. Ryan carried enough explosives to level a building. Amy had medical supplies and backup electronics. Veltar and his volunteers carried communication equipment and emergency supplies. They exited through the hidden tunnel on the backside of the hill and began moving through the corrupted landscape toward the Vex lines. The black metallic ground felt wrong under their feet, pulsing with an alien rhythm that made everyone nervous. The first Vex patrol they encountered never knew what hit them. Jake and Ryan had perfected their ambush techniques over the past month. Silent, fast, and brutal, the alien scouts were down before they could raise an alarm. "Their communication is still linked," Amy whispered, studying her readings. "If we can get close enough to their command node, the electromagnetic pulse should disrupt their entire network." They moved deeper into Vex-controlled territory. The base landscape around them had been completely transformed. Where once there had been purple grasslands and crystal streams, now there were industrial complexes that seemed to grow from the ground itself. The air was thick with the smell of metal and something organic that was decomposing. "This is what they do," Veltar said quietly. "They don't just conquer worlds, they digest them." Jake studied the Vex siege engine through his scope. It was massive, easily 50 meters tall and twice as long. Energy conduits ran along its sides, feeding power from underground taps that connected to the planet's geothermal systems. The Vex had literally turned Kepler 442b's own energy against its defenders, but that connection worked both ways. "Lisa, are you monitoring the geological sensors?" Jake whispered into his radio. "Copy that, Captain. I'm reading massive stress, buildups along the fault lines. Your theory appears to be correct. The Vex have destabilized the entire underground system with their drilling. How much of a push would it take to trigger a complete collapse? If we detonate the seismic charges in the right sequence, we could redirect the underground water flow and cause a cascade failure. But the timing has to be perfect." Jake looked at his team. They were crouched behind a twisted metal structure that had once been a Zephyrian communications tower. Ahead of them, the Vex command center rose like a mechanical mountain from the corrupted ground. Hundreds of creatures moved around its base, coordinating the siege operations. "Amy, how close do you need to get?" "Within 50 meters of their central processing node. That tall spire in the middle, that's where their command signals originate. 50 meters meant getting right into the heart of the Vex forces. It was a suicide mission for anyone except humans who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to hunt things bigger and stronger than themselves. "Veltar, take your people and circle around to the east. When the pulse goes off, guide any survivors back to the bunker. Ryan, you're with me." "Captain," Veltar said hesitantly. "What about you? How will you escape after triggering the device?" Jake looked at the Vex command center, calculating angles and distances. "We'll figure that out when we get there." The third energy blast from the siege engine lit up the sky behind them. This one struck the bunker entrance directly, causing a massive explosion that could be seen from kilometers away. "They think they got us," Ryan observed. Good. Let them think that. Jake and Ryan began their approach to the command center. They moved like ghosts through the Vex formations, using every piece of cover and taking advantage of the aliens' focus on their siege operations. The electromagnetic device was compact but fragile. One hit from a Vex weapon would destroy it. They reached the base of the command spire just as the fourth energy blast fired. This time there was no explosion in the distance. The siege engine was firing into empty rock, believing its targets were already dead. Uploading virus to their command network. Amy's voice whispered through their earpieces. She had found a data port at the base of the spire and was using human computer protocols to confuse the Vex systems. Jake attached the electromagnetic pulse device to the central support strut of the spire. The device began its 30-second activation sequence, emitting a barely audible whine as it charged. That was when everything went wrong. A Vex patrol rounded the corner of the spire and spotted the two humans. The aliens opened fire immediately, energy blasts scorching the ground around Jake and Ryan's positions. "Contact!" Ryan shouted, returning fire with his rifle. The sound of gunfire attracted more Vex forces. Within seconds, Jake and Ryan were surrounded by angry aliens who had finally figured out that the humans were not dead. 20 seconds, Jake said, checking his watch. 10 seconds, Ryan corrected, diving behind a pile of metal debris as energy beams flew overhead, the electromagnetic pulse device activated with a flash of light that was visible across the entire planet. Every Vex creature within 3 kilometers suddenly stopped moving, their mechanical components sparking and smoking as their neural networks crashed. But the device had done more than just disable local Vex forces. The pulse had also triggered every seismic charge Lisa had planted throughout the underground tunnel system. The ground began to shake. "Lisa, now!" Jake shouted into his radio. The Intrepid appeared in the sky above them, descending rapidly toward the Vex command center. Emergency hatches opened in the ship's hull and rescue cables dropped toward the surface. Jake and Ryan grabbed the cables just as the first major earthquake hit. Fault lines that had been stable for millions of years suddenly shifted. Underground, water systems redirected their flow. The careful balance that held the planet's crust together collapsed in a cascade of geological destruction. The Vex siege engine, massive as it was, simply disappeared into a crack in the ground that opened beneath it. The alien army that had seemed unstoppable found itself scattered across a landscape that was literally coming apart. As the Intrepid lifted them to safety, Jake watched the destruction spread across the planet below. The earthquake was not random. It followed the pattern of Vex corruption, as if the planet itself was rejecting the alien infection. Geological surveys show massive underground flooding, Lisa reported. The Vex tunnel systems are completely compromised. Their industrial complexes are sinking into quicksand. But the most important effect was psychological. Throughout the galaxy, monitoring stations had detected the massive electromagnetic pulse from Kepler 442b. Every species with deep space sensors knew that something unprecedented had happened in that system. On the galactic capital world of Centaurus, Prime, the High Council gathered in emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species debated what to do about the signals from Kepler 442b. "The energy readings are off the charts," reported the Altarian science minister. "Whatever happened there was equivalent to a stellar event. And the Vex signals have gone silent," added the crystalline defense coordinator. "For the first time in decades, there are no reports of Vex activity in that entire sector." The message from Captain Jake Morrison traveled across the galaxy at the speed of light, reaching Earth 3 days later. Admiral Kate Sullivan read the report twice, then called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. The conference room. In Earth Command headquarters fell silent as she read Jake's words aloud. Priority Alpha distress call. Unknown hostile species designated Vex Swarm has destroyed Zephyrian colony on Kepler 442b. Estimate 50,000 civilian casualties. Survivors numbering 3,000 under siege. Species demonstrates advanced biomechanical technology and aggressive expansion behavior. Request immediate military intervention. Will hold position until reinforcements arrive. General Marcus. Webb, head of Earth's Marine Corps, leaned forward. How many people does Morrison have with him? 3 crew members and 1 exploration vessel, Admiral Sullivan replied. The room erupted in discussion. Most of the council members wanted to write Jake off as a fool who had gotten himself and his crew killed trying to be heroes. But Admiral Sullivan knew Jake Morrison. She had served with him during the Jupiter-Moon Wars, and she knew he didn't make impossible promises. How long to get a battle group to that system? She asked. 6 weeks minimum, replied Fleet Captain Tony Garcia. The closest heavy units are in the Centauri sector. Then we start moving now, Sullivan decided. Full battle group. The Wolverine, plus Marine Expeditionary Force. And I want volunteers only. Anyone who doesn't want to fight unknown aliens in deep space can stay home. 6 weeks. Jake would have to hold out for 6 weeks against an enemy that had destroyed an entire planet. Most of the council thought it was impossible. They were about to learn they were wrong. Back on Kepler 442b, Jake was discovering that fighting the Vex was like solving a puzzle. Each attack taught him something new about how they thought and moved. The creatures were smart, but they followed patterns. They adapted to weapons and tactics they had seen before, but they struggled with anything completely new. They're like a computer, he explained to Veltar as they watched Vex forces gathering outside the bunker. They process information and respond logically, but humans don't always act logically. Lisa Park had turned the bunker's communication system into a command center. She monitored Vex movements, tracked their behavior patterns, and coordinated with the Intrepid, which was still hidden 10 kilometers away. Her engineering skills had also improved the bunker's defenses, rigging explosive traps in the tunnels and boosting the power systems. Dr. Amy Wells was treating wounded Zephyrians while studying Vex biology from samples Ryan had collected during their skirmishes. What she found was disturbing but useful. The Vex were not a natural species. They were engineered. Someone or something had designed them specifically for conquest and consumption. Look at this, she showed Jake on her portable microscope. Their cells have both organic and mechanical components. They can literally rebuild themselves by consuming other life forms and raw materials. That explains the black stuff growing everywhere, Jake said. They're turning the planet into food. But here's the interesting part, Amy continued. They have a weakness. Their neural networks operate on a specific electromagnetic frequency. Disrupt that frequency, and you can scramble their coordination. Jake filed that information away. Every piece of intelligence might be crucial in the weeks ahead. The first major Vex assault came on the 4th day. Jake had been expecting it, and he was ready. Instead of staying in the bunker and letting the Vex break down the door, he took the fight to them. Ryan had spent the previous night rigging explosive charges throughout the tunnel system leading to the bunker. When motion sensors detected Vex infiltrators in the tunnels, Jake triggered the charges remotely. The explosions collapsed half the tunnel network and buried dozens of Vex warriors. But that was just the beginning. While the Vex were focused on the tunnel entrances, Jake and Ryan emerged from a hidden exit on the far side of the hill. They attacked the Vex staging area from behind, using grenades and rifle fire to destroy equipment and scatter the alien forces. "It's called asymmetric warfare," Jake explained to Veltar later. "You don't fight the enemy where they're strong. You hit them where they're weak and disappear before they can respond." The Vex tried to adapt. They posted guards around the hill and set up detection grids to prevent human infiltration. So Jake changed tactics again. Instead of ground attacks, he used the Intrepid for hit-and-run strikes from orbit. Lisa Park had modified the ship's cargo bay to carry improvised bombs made from engineering supplies. The Intrepid would appear suddenly over a Vex formation, drop its payload, and disappear before the aliens could respond. The kinetic bombardment destroyed Vex structures and forced them to constantly relocate their forces. After 2 weeks of this harassment, something unexpected happened. The Vex stopped attacking the bunker and began withdrawing from the area around it. "They're learning," Jake realized. "They know they can't take the bunker without heavy losses, so they're changing strategy." Veltar was confused. "Isn't that good? They're leaving us alone." "No," Jake said grimly. "They're calling for reinforcements." Jake's prediction proved correct 3 days later when new Vex ships began arriving in the system. These were different from the original invasion force. Larger, more heavily armed, and carrying creatures that looked like nothing they had seen before. "I count 12 heavy cruisers and at least 30 support vessels," Lisa reported from the Intrepid, "and they're landing thousands of new troops." Jake studied the intelligence reports Amy had compiled. The new Vex forces included flying variants, heavily armored siege units, and something she called adapters, creatures that seemed designed specifically to counter human tactics. "They're bringing everything they have," Ryan observed. "Good," Jake said, surprising everyone. "That means they consider us a real threat." The second phase of the siege began with a massive Vex offensive designed to overwhelm the human defenders through sheer numbers. Wave after wave of creatures attacked the bunker from all directions while heavy weapons bombarded the entrance. But Jake had spent the past 3 weeks preparing for exactly this scenario. The hill containing the bunker was now honeycombed with tunnels, firing positions, and booby traps. Motion sensors triggered explosive charges that brought down attacking Vex formations. Hidden weapon caches allowed the defenders to maintain fire from multiple positions. Most importantly, Jake had been training the Zephyrian survivors. They couldn't fight like humans, but they could operate equipment, relay information, and support the defense in crucial ways. Veltar himself had become an expert at coordinating sensor data and predicting Vex attack patterns. The siege lasted for 5 days. Vex forces hammered the human positions with everything they had, adapting to each defensive measure only to run into new obstacles. Jake rotated tactics constantly, never giving the aliens time to fully counter any single approach. On the morning of the 6th day, the Vex pulled back again. But this time, they didn't withdraw to regroup. Instead, they began building something massive in the valley below the bunker. "It's a siege engine," Amy reported, studying the construction through long-range sensors. "Some kind of energy weapon, designed to crack open hardened positions." Jake watched the alien construction work and smiled grimly. The Vex had finally gotten frustrated enough to bring out their heavy equipment. They were committing everything to destroying the human defenders. "How long until it's operational?" he asked. "Maybe 48 hours, Amy estimated. Jake activated his radio and contacted the Intrepid. "Lisa, what's our status on those reinforcements?" "Still 3 weeks out minimum," she replied. "Admiral Sullivan's battle group is moving as fast as they can, but it's a long way." 3 weeks. Jake looked around at his small band of defenders. Ryan was cleaning his rifle with the methodical care of a professional soldier. Amy was treating a Zephyrian who had been injured in the latest attack. Veltar was coordinating with the other survivors, making sure everyone knew their jobs. They had held out for 3 weeks against impossible odds. Now the Vex were bringing their ultimate weapon to bear, and Jake had less than 2 days to figure out how to stop it. "Veltar," he called. "I need to know everything about this planet's geology. Fault lines, underground water systems, mineral deposits, everything." "Why?" the Zephyrian administrator asked. Jake studied the Vex siege engine taking shape in the A Valley. It was huge, easily the size of a city block, with multiple weapon systems and heavy armor plating. A direct assault would be suicide, but humans had been fighting superior enemies for their entire history. They had learned that sometimes the best way to defeat a stronger opponent was not to fight them at all. It was to change the rules of the game entirely. "Because," Jake said with a dangerous smile, "I'm going to show these aliens what happens when you back humans into a corner." As the Vex siege engine neared completion, Jake began implementing the most audacious plan of his military career. Hita Amalda was going to turn the planet itself into a weapon. The Vex thought they understood human tactics now. They thought they had adapted to everything Jake could throw at them. They were about to learn that they had only seen the beginning of what humans were capable of when they got serious about fighting. The Intrepid dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system and immediately went to battle stations. What Jake Morrison saw on the main screen made his jaw clench. Debris filled the space around the planet. Twisted. Metal that had once been defensive satellites and the broken remains of civilian ships that had tried to flee. "Jesus," Lisa Park whispered from her engineering station. The planet itself looked wrong. From space, Kepler 442b should have shown the purple and green colors of Zephyrian agriculture. Instead, dark patches spread across the continents like cancer. Strange geometric structures rose from the surface, clearly visible even from orbit. They pulsed with a sickly red light that hurt to look at. "Life signs?" Jake asked. Dr. Amy Wells bent over her sensors. "I'm reading approximately 2,800 Zephyrian life signs, all concentrated in underground areas. But there's something else. Thousands of other readings that don't match any known species in our database." "The Vex," Ryan Carter said grimly. He was studying the tactical display where red dots swarmed across the planet's surface. "Whatever they are, they're everywhere." Jake activated the communication system and broadcast on all Zephyrian frequencies. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Intrepid. We received your distress call. Please respond if you can hear this message." For a long moment, there was only static. Then a weak voice came through the speakers. "Earthship, this is Veltar. Are you really here? Or am I finally losing my mind?" "We're here," Jake said. "What's your status?" "We have 2,900 survivors in the underground command bunker. Our power is failing, and the Vex are getting closer to finding us. They've taken the entire surface, and they're spreading some kind of corruption that turns everything into their nesting material." Jake studied the planet below. The dark patches were growing larger as he watched. "Can you guide us to your location? We're going to attempt an extraction." There was a pause, then Veltar's voice came back, sounding confused. "Extraction? You mean you're coming down there, to the surface?" "That's the plan," Jake said. "But the Vex will kill you. They've destroyed everything we sent against them. They're not just animals. They're smart, organized, and they adapt to whatever we try. Please, don't throw your lives away for us." Jake looked around at his crew. Lisa was already pulling up landing site options on her console. Ryan was checking weapon systems. Amy was gathering medical supplies. None of them showed any sign of backing down. "Stand by, Veltar. We're coming down." The Intrepid descended through the atmosphere under full stealth systems. Jake had chosen a landing site 10 kilometers from the Zephyrian bunker, in what looked like a clear area between two of the Vex structures. As they got closer, the scope of the devastation became clear. The Vex had not just conquered the planet. They had transformed it. The purple grass was gone, replaced by a black metallic substance that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Tall spires rose from the corrupted ground, connected by tubes and cables that carried flowing liquids. It looked like a factory, Jake realized. The Vex were turning the entire world into some kind of production facility. "Setting down in 30 seconds, Lisa reported. "And Captain, we've got movement. Lots of it." The main screen showed the area around their landing site. Dark shapes moved between the twisted trees and metallic growths. They walked on 6 legs and had bodies that seemed to be part insect, part machine. Each one was about the size of a large car with claws that gleamed like polished steel. "How many?" Jake asked. "Maybe 50 in visual range," Ryan said. "But thermal imaging shows more coming from all directions. They know we're here." The ship touched down with a soft thud. Immediately, alarms began blaring as the Vex creatures converged on their position. "All right, people," Jake said, standing up. "This is what we trained for. Ryan, you're with me. Lisa, keep the ship ready for immediate takeoff. Amy, prep the medical bay for incoming wounded." Jake and Ryan moved to the armory and began suiting up. The standard human combat gear looked primitive compared to the energy weapons most galactic species used. But it was proven technology. Kinetic rifles that fired depleted uranium rounds, explosive grenades, and armor made from Earth's strongest materials. "Sir," Ryan said as he checked his rifle, "the Zephyrians said these things adapt to whatever gets thrown at them. What if they've never seen anything like our weapons?" Jake smiled grimly. "Then they're in for a surprise." The two men exited the ship through the cargo bay. Immediately, the alien air hit them, too thin, too cold, and filled with a metallic taste that made their filters work overtime. The landscape around them looked like a nightmare. Black ground covered with strange growths, twisted structures that hurt to look at, and the constant sound of something breathing. The first Vex creature came around a metallic boulder at a dead run. It was worse than the long-range sensors had shown. The thing was definitely part insect, with a segmented body and compound eyes. But parts of it were clearly mechanical. Cables ran along its legs, its claws sparked with electricity, and a red light pulsed in its chest like a heartbeat. Ryan fired first. The kinetic round hit the creature center mass and punched completely through its body. The Vex stumbled, looked down at the hole in its chest with what might have been surprise, then collapsed. "Well," Ryan said, "they bleed." More creatures appeared, from all sides. Jake and Ryan positioned themselves back to back and began firing in controlled bursts. Each shot dropped a Vex, but there seemed to be no end to them. "Contact Veltar," Jake said between shots. "Tell him we need directions to his bunker. We can't stay here long." Ryan activated his radio while reloading. "Zephyrian Command. This is the human landing party. We need an immediate route to your position." Veltar's voice came back, filled with static and disbelief. "You're fighting them and winning? How is that possible?" "We'll explain later," Jake said, putting down 3 more Vex with quick shots. "Right now, we need to move." Follow the main road east for 2 kilometers, then turn north at the broken bridge. But the tunnel entrance is guarded by at least 20 Vex warriors. They're bigger than the scouts you're fighting now. Jake looked at Ryan, who shrugged. 20 doesn't sound too bad. They began moving east, fighting their way through groups of Vex creatures. What struck Jake was how the aliens reacted to human weapons. They seemed genuinely confused by the kinetic rounds. Energy weapons they could adapt to, absorbing or deflecting the beams. But solid projectiles moving at high velocity? That was, apparently, something new. The broken bridge marked the halfway point to the bunker. Jake and Ryan took cover behind the twisted remains of a Zephyrian transport and assessed the situation. Ahead of them, the entrance to the underground bunker was clearly visible. A reinforced door built into a hillside. And between them and the door stood the Vex warriors Veltar had warned them about. These creatures were different from the scouts. They stood 3 meters tall on 4 legs, with arms that ended in weapon systems instead of claws. Their bodies were more machine than insect, covered in armor plating that shifted and adjusted as they moved. "Those look like trouble," Ryan observed. "Yeah," Jake agreed. "Good thing we brought the heavy stuff." Jake pulled out what looked like a small metal cylinder and extended it into a meter-long tube. The rocket-propelled grenade launcher was another piece of primitive human technology that most galactic species had abandoned in favor of energy weapons. "Think that'll work?" Ryan asked. "Only one way to find out." Jake aimed carefully and fired. The grenade arced through the air and exploded directly in the center of the Vex formation. The blast threw 2 of the warriors completely off their feet and sent the others stumbling in confusion. "Move!" Jake shouted. They ran toward the bunker, entrance firing as they went. The surviving Vex warriors recovered quickly and began shooting back with energy weapons that left smoking craters in the ground. But they were aiming where Jake and Ryan had been, not where they were going. Human military doctrine emphasized speed and unpredictability, concepts that the methodical Vex seemed to struggle with. They reached the bunker door just as it began to open. Tall, blue-gray figures in environmental suits gestured frantically for them to hurry inside. Jake and Ryan dove through the opening as energy blasts scorched the air behind them. The door slammed shut and massive bolts engaged. Jake found himself in a large underground chamber filled with Zephyrian civilians. They stared at the 2 humans with expressions of amazement and fear. A tall Zephyrian in official robes approached them. "I am Veltar. You are the humans who came to help us." "That's right," Jake said, removing his helmet. "Captain Jake Morrison, Earth Space Forces." Veltar studied Jake's face carefully. "You fought the Vex warriors and survived. No one has ever done that before." "We're still here, aren't we?" Jake said with a slight smile. "But how? They adapt to every weapon, every tactic. They learn and become stronger." Ryan checked his ammunition count. "Maybe they've never had to adapt to bullets before." An explosion shook the bunker, sending dust falling from the ceiling. Through the reinforced windows, they could see more Vex gathering. The morning sky over New Harmony Colony turned black with wings and metal. Veltar pressed his face against the observation window of the command center and watched his world die. The Vex swarm moved like a living storm across the purple grasslands of Kepler 442b. Each creature was the size of a ground transport, with razor-sharp limbs that could cut through steel and eyes that glowed red in the dim light of their distant star. Veltar was the colony administrator, a job that used to mean managing crop schedules and settling disputes between farmers. Now it meant watching thousands of his people run for their lives while monsters from space devoured everything they had built. The Zephyrians were a peaceful people, tall and thin with blue-gray skin and large eyes that helped them see in low light. They had never fought a war. They didn't even have weapons beyond simple tools for hunting small animals. The communication console behind him buzzed with desperate voices. "The southern farms are gone," came one report. "They took everything. Even the soil." Another voice cracked with fear. "The children's center is surrounded. We can't get them out." Veltar closed his eyes and tried to think. His people were dying and he had no way to save them. The Galactic Council would debate for months before sending help, if they sent any at all. Most species in the galaxy were, like the Zephyrians, peaceful, civilized, and completely helpless against something like the Vex. The Vex had appeared 3 days ago without warning. Their ships looked like giant insects made of dark metal and living tissue. They landed in the fertile valleys and immediately began tearing apart everything they found. They didn't just kill, they consumed. Trees, buildings, vehicles, and worst of all, people. The lucky ones died quickly. The others were taken alive, dragged into the Vex ships where screams could be heard for hours before they stopped. "Sir," his communication officer said, her voice shaking. "The main colony shield is down to 20% power. The Vex are using some kind of energy weapon that drains our batteries faster than we can recharge them." Veltar nodded but didn't turn around. Outside the window he could see the massive Vex breeding ships hovering over what used to be the market district. Long tubes extended from their bellies, pumping something dark and thick into the ground. Whatever they were doing, it was spreading. The purple grass was turning black, and strange metallic structures were growing from the corrupted soil. "How long until they break through?" he asked. 6 hours, maybe less. 6 hours. Veltar thought about the 3,000 Zephyrians hiding in the underground shelters beneath the command center. They had food for maybe a week and no way to fight back. The Vex would find them eventually. They always did. That was when Veltar made the decision that would change everything. He walked to the emergency communication station and activated the galaxy-wide distress beacon. The message would go out on all frequencies, reaching every world within 100 light years. Most species would ignore it or send sympathy messages. Some might even blame the Zephyrians for attracting the Vex in the first place. But maybe, just maybe, someone would come. 3,000 light-years away, the human exploration ship UES Intrepid drifted through empty space between star systems. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, reading reports about mineral surveys and mapping data. It was quiet work, the kind that most humans found boring after a few months. But Jake loved it. After 20 years in Earth's military, the peaceful silence of deep space felt like a gift. Jake was 42 years old, tall and broad-shouldered with brown hair that was starting to show gray at the temples. He had kind eyes, but hard hands, the kind that came from years of fighting in places most people had never heard of. His crew knew he had seen action in the Martian Rebellion and the Jupiter Moon Wars, but he rarely talked about those days. "Captain," called Lisa Park from the engineering station. "I'm picking up something weird on the long-range sensors." Lisa was 35, small and quick with black hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail. She could fix anything that broke and improve anything that worked. Jake had served with her for 8 years and trusted her completely. "Define weird," Jake said, setting down his tablet. "It's an emergency beacon, but it's using an old format. pre-galactic standard, and it's coming from way outside our patrol area. Jake frowned. Emergency beacons were serious business. Earth had signed treaties with the Galactic Council that required all human ships to respond to distress calls when possible. But their current mission was classified scientific work, and deviating from course required approval from Earth Command. Put it on speakers, Jake said. The bridge filled with static, then a voice speaking in the universal trade language that most galactic species understood. The translation software turned it into English. This is Colony Administrator Veltar of New Harmony, Kepler 442b. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Our defenses have failed. Civilian casualties are massive. We have approximately 3,000 survivors in emergency shelters. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need immediate assistance. We cannot hold out much longer. The message repeated twice, then cut to static. Ryan Carter looked up from the tactical station. He was Jake's weapons officer, a serious man, in his 30s, with sharp features and eyes that never seemed to rest. Sir, that system is 2 days away at maximum burn, and it's not on our approved patrol route. Dr. Amy Wells stepped forward from her station at the back of the bridge. She was the ship's medical officer, a woman in her late 20s with red hair and the kind of gentle manner that made people trust her instantly. But Jake knew she was tougher than she looked. You had to be tough to serve on deep space missions. Captain, Amy said quietly. That sounded like a genocide. Jake stared at the star chart on the main screen. Kepler 442b was marked as a peaceful agricultural world, home to about 50,000 Zephyrians. It was also marked as being under Galactic Council protection, which meant any attack on it was a major violation of interstellar law. Lisa, what do we know about hostile forces in that area? Jake asked. Lisa's fingers flew over her console. Nothing in the recent reports, sir. But there have been rumors about something called the Vex Swarm operating in the Outer Rim territories. Ships that respond to distress calls from those areas usually don't come back. Or they come back empty, Ryan added grimly. I've heard stories from the trading posts. Entire crews just gone. Ships found drifting with no signs of struggle. Jake considered his options. Earth Command had given him strict orders to complete the mineral survey of the Kepler 438 system and return home. Any deviation required approval, and getting approval could take days. By then, the 3,000 Zephyrians would likely be dead. On the other hand, ignoring a distress call was a court-martial offense. And Jake had not spent 20 years in the military to let innocent people die while he filled out paperwork. Lisa, how long to reach Kepler 442b at maximum burn? He asked. 43 hours, sir. Ryan, what's our weapons status? Full load of kinetic torpedoes, particle beam arrays charged, and we've got the new railgun system that Earth Command wanted us to test. Jake nodded slowly. The Intrepid was an exploration ship, but like all human vessels, it was heavily armed. Humans had learned long ago that the galaxy was not always a friendly place. Amy, medical supplies? Enough for a major. Emergency plus the portable surgical units. Jake looked around at his crew. These were good people, trained professionals, who had followed him through dangerous situations before. They were waiting for his decision, and he could see in their faces that they already knew what it would be. Set course for Kepler 442b. Maximum. Burn, Jake said, and send a message to Earth Command informing them of our change in mission parameters. Sir, Ryan said carefully, they're going to be angry about this. Jake smiled grimly. Let them be angry. We've got work to do. As the Intrepid changed course and began accelerating toward the distant world, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something bigger than a simple rescue mission. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humans. They didn't run from monsters. They ran toward them.